Hello and welcome to this course, Introduction to Indian Writing in English. Now, as all of you are aware that we are here talking about the Indian writers who had written literature in English language. Sometimes students think that all kind of literature which is written by the Indian writers can be considered into this paper, Indian Writing in English. But to the extent of knowledge which I had, I want to say that the writers who had written in English language, they are considered into this paper, Indian Writing in English. Now, there are many writers, the list is endless into this category, Indian Writing in English. The writers who fall into the category of the writers who had written into English language and who belong to India, whose ethnicity is Indian, but as we have limitations of syllabus, we have limitations of units, so we tried to do our best in including and amalgamating the best of all those writers into this course. I want to begin this course. I want to begin with the poem Night of the Scorpion by Nassim Ezekiel. As it is displayed in front of you, that this poem, Night of the Scorpion, is written by Nassim Ezekiel. His name is so popular, so famous, and the poem which we have chosen for this unit, it is also so popular that it do not need any introduction. But before beginning this poem, Night of the Scorpion by Nassim Ezekiel, I wish to discuss few outcomes which are going to achieved by you after the completion of this unit. As the outcomes are visible, the first thing which you have to notice is the point which employ an insight about the oeuvre of Indian writers. Now, there are many Indian writers, like I told you that the list is endless, and it was a very tough task to include the best of the best writers into this course. But we were able to do it so that you can understand and you can get an insight into the oeuvre of the Indian writers. The second outcome which you are going to achieve with let's say the completion of this unit is compare the historical contexts in which these texts were written. Now, this is very, let's say, analytical to compare and understand and to analyze the historical contexts in which the texts were written. Now, the texts, whenever we are reading any text, it is important to understand its historical context also. And such kind of historical contexts give us a critical thought, a critical analysis of the background in which the texts are written, and in this way we would be able to get a deeper insight into the text. The third outcome which you are going to achieve after the completion of this unit will be illustrate the various writing dimensions of Indian writers. Now, when people generally say that the Indian literature or Indian writing in English is not, let's say, very much detailed, very much analytical, very much, let's say, in depth, it is our duty to understand the writers, the works which those writers had written, to understand the dimensions to which the Indian writers were able to reach. And only then we would be able to understand and analyze Indian literature or Indian writing in English in comparison with the world literature or the literature written in the other countries. After coming to the outcomes, now we have to begin discussion on the very first topic in our course, very first topic in Unit 1, Nassim Ezekiel's Night of the Scorpion, and that is Ezekiel's position in Indian poetry. Now, Nassim Ezekiel, when the name comes in our mind, he is so popular poet, but we have to understand along with his popularity, his position also in Indian poetry. Now, there are many poets in India, many of them are famous, many of them are popular, but then Ezekiel has his own, let's say, corner which no other poet can share in Indian writing in English. Let us begin with a brief introduction of Nassim Ezekiel. Nassim Ezekiel was born on 24th December 1924 and he died on 9th of January 2004. He was an Indian Jewish actor, playwright, editor and art critic. Now, you see, when we read about Nassim Ezekiel, we see that he was, along with a, let's say, creative writer, along with a poet, he was an actor, he was a playwright, he was an editor, he was an art critic. So his personality was versatile. He has lot of let's say characteristics, lot of things, lot of qualities which were incorporated into his behavior, into, let's say, his personality. Another thing which is important in this point is the date. Friends, whenever we talk about Indian writing in English, we generally talk about the, let's say, the beginning of the 20th century, then the complete 20th century and then the 21st century. Now, this 20th century and 21st century time, you may find it very less to describe Indian writing in English. But with the popularity of English language into India, these things, writing into English language, this kind of trend became famous into literature. Although there were writers before 20th century who were able to write and who popularized the Indian way of writing into the world, who introduced Indian way of thinking to the world. But generally we talk about, let's say, this century, 20th century and the 21st century writers into Indian writing in English. As it is clear with the dates that Ezekiel, he majorly wrote, let's say, near to the Second World War and after the Second World War. So this is something which is clear from the first point. Now, when I come to the next point, it is very interesting to see that he was a foundational figure in post-colonial India's literary history. Now, what is post-colonial? You may find this term, you might have heard about this term before, but you may find this term as little difficult to describe. Now, post-colonial, as all of you know, that India was one of the British colonies and was able to get independence in 1947, and the writers who wrote about, let's say, the colonial impacts on India, the Indian society, and the colonial impacts on the other colonies of the world, they are considered as post-colonial writers. And in this list, I must say that Nassim Ezekiel was, let's say, one of the most famous post-colonial writers into India's literary history. Specifically for Indian writing in English, his contribution is immense. I mean, there are no words to discuss and to go into depth how much Nassim Ezekiel was able to introduce Indian way of thinking to the world with the help of his style of writing. Let us move further and let us know, let's say, a little more about Nassim Ezekiel. He was awarded the Sahitya Akademi Award in 1983 for his poetry collection Later Day Plasms by the Sahitya Akademi, India's National Academy of Letters. Now, this name must be familiar to you, Sahitya Akademi. Sahitya Akademi is one of the, let's say, most famous institutions which gives awards to the literary writers, creative writers, critiques, etc. And this was a very, let's say, honorable award for an Indian to get, which Nassim Ezekiel was able to get in 1983. As he got it with his poetry collection, Later Day Plasm, as it is written here. So, you need to understand the position of this writer into Indian writing in English. Moving further, Ezekiel is universally recognized and appreciated as being one of the most notable and accomplished Indian English language poets of the 20th century. There are various reasons for that. We are going to study about them in the coming slides. Why Nassim Ezekiel is considered as, let's say, one of the most famous? As we saw on the earlier slide, that he is universally recognized. Universally recognized means writers, poets, critiques from the other countries, they have recognized, they have appreciated this person as one of the most notable and one of the most accomplished. Accomplished, it means complete in himself, without, let's say, any error, without any problem. This person who is, let's say, the pioneer, who is, let's say, the epitome of Indian English language in the 20th century, has various kind of characteristics into his poetry. Let us talk about those characteristics, those poetic language, English language characteristics one by one. Now, the poetry of this writer, it has a subtle, restrained and well crafted diction. Now, subtle, you might think that there are many other writers who try to become a subtle writer into their writings, who try to restrain, limit their writing to a particular, let's say, theme when they are writing about it. And those people also try to craft their diction into the best possible manner. But is it something which can be done by all the writers of the century? We have to focus on this, because lot of, let's say, skill, lot of hard work, lot of, let's say, repetition of writing is required to achieve that kind of craft, to achieve that kind of diction. The next characteristic which is related to the writing style of Nassim Ezekiel is that he deals with common and ordinary themes. Now, you might think that can we make these, let's say, mundane themes or these common themes or these ordinary themes interesting? Well, it depends on the writer's writing style. How much writer can go into depth in the routine affairs, in the day-to-day activities, which all of us see in our society, but none of us can explain in the way like Nassim Ezekiel was able to do into his poetry. Moving to the next characteristic of Nassim Ezekiel, manifesting cognitive depth. Now, this point is very interesting. he was able to manifest, he was able to, let's say, create a cognitive depth. Now, what is cognitive? Cognitive is something which, let's say, is related to the learning of mind, how our mind learns, that kind of depth. And if I talk about the poetry of Nassim Ezekiel, he was the person who make each of us understand that kind of depth, that kind of, let's say, mental understanding, how the mind learns, how the mind works into a direction. He was able to achieve that with the help of his literary writings. Over to the last point on this slide. He was an unsentimental, realistic sensibility. Now, Nassim Ezekiel was a person, you might say that poets or the writers, they are always emotional, they are always sentimental. So, how can we say that this characteristic, unsentimental or realistic, can be sensible? Well, this is something which is a very tedious task, and Nassim Ezekiel was able to complete it with the help of his writings. He was in one way sensible, and on the other way he was unsentimental also in his writings, and which is why his writings can be considered as the best examples of realism. Realism which was popular in the 20th century into the literature of all the spheres of the world, all the corners of the world. And Nassim Ezekiel was able to make it, let's say, real into the Indian writing in English. Now, moving to the next point, when we talk about Nassim Ezekiel, we find that Ezekiel enriched and established Indian English language poetry. Now, we have discussed a lot about how Ezekiel was able to enrich, or Ezekiel was able to establish Indian English language poetry. But how was he able to do that? He was a writer of the 20th century. There were many other writers, many other poets, but there are some things which are different into his writing. There are some things which makes him a unique writer, and it is just because of those characteristics that Indian English language poetry, please focus on this term, I am here repeating, Indian English language poetry. Now, this term was, let's say, established, or this term was enriched by Nassim Ezekiel through his, then the first could be modernist innovations and techniques. Now, when I talk about modernist innovations and techniques, I must say that Nassim Ezekiel was in true sense a modern writer. Modern writer, modernism, as all of you know, was the most famous movement in the 20th century, and then came postmodernism also. But we are here concerned about modernism, and Nassim Ezekiel was considered as the modernist innovations and techniques used by him. There are a lot of innovations, there are a lot of techniques which are related to modernism. Realism is one of them. And Nassim Ezekiel was able to apply all those characteristics into his writing style. He was able to move beyond purely spiritual and Orientalist themes. Now, critics generally object about Indian writing that it is too much spiritual, or it is too much, let's say, Oriental, focusing on the Oriental themes. But Nassim Ezekiel was the one who was able to move away from that, let's say, stereotyping of spirituality or stereotyping of Oriental themes into his writings. Although you will find the spirituality to an extent into his works, but his spirituality has a kind of rationality as well. It is a mixture, and we are going to look at it when we will discuss this poem, Night of the Scorpion. The next thing which was existing in his writings was that he included a wider range of concerns and interests. Now, every writer, every poet focuses on the concerns of the common people, concerns of the readers as well. And only then those writers, those poets, those critics were able to make themselves famous into the society. So those concerns, those issues or those interests, this person, Nassim Ezekiel, was able to use into his writing style. He was also able to include mundane familiar events. Now, there are various events which we see in our day-to-day life. They can be called as mundane events. Take for example, all of us see in our society, in our family, some marriage is taking place. And if it is happening in our family, then we are the part of that, let's say, event. But even if we are part of that event, we are not able to explain about it into our ideas, into our thoughts, into our writings. So such kind of mundane familial events or such kind of, let's say, individual anguish and skeptical societal introspections were able to get a space into the works of Nassim Ezekiel. Now, individual anguish, what can be called as individual anguish? Some concerns which an individual has, some concern which any person, male or female, has with the circumstances, with the society, with any other thing into the society. So such things were well addressed by this person, Nassim Ezekiel. Then skeptical societal introspections. There are some things on which every person is skeptical or suspicious whether this is right or wrong, whether there is some kind of dilemma. And then we introspect. Introspect means we think about our inner self. We go into our own thoughts and then we introspect that whether we are confused and that confusion is answered by someone or by some external source or not. And when I talk about this person, Nassim Ezekiel, I must say that he was able to answer those skeptical questions which raise into the mind of an individual. And this is one of the characteristics which is why he is a very famous writer into the Indian readers. Ezekiel uses Indian English as a means to adopt the voices of others. Now, you might think that there are writers, there are poets, there are critics who are very self-centered, who talk only about their own ideologies, who talk only about, let's say, their own affairs, their own preferences. But Nassim Ezekiel is a person who was able to use Indian English as a means to adopt the voices of others. So in that way, we can say that he is the representative of other people, the people who do not have voices. And Ezekiel was the one with the poetry of whom, with the works of whom, those people got voices to explain their way of thinking. We will look at it when we will see, when we will read and we will critically analyze this poem, Night of the Scorpion. Because Night of the Scorpion is dealing with the common villagers, the villagers maybe who are illiterate, the villagers who are not able to read and write, they are not able to explain their ideas in the best possible way. And Nassim Ezekiel was the one who gave voice to such common Indian villagers. Another characteristic which makes him different is especially when he means to satirize those voices and their point of view. Now, there are various kind of voices in the Indian society, but Nassim Ezekiel was the one who used the skill of satire to get a deeper insight into those voices. Now, satire, let's say, again a familiar word to you, but it is very tough to use satire into your writing, into your, let's say, style of thinking. And Nassim Ezekiel was the one who was able to achieve this kind of satire into his voice, and thus he was able to establish a point of view also. It means that we cannot say that the poetry of Nassim Ezekiel is, let's say, loose. It is not centralized. It is not, let's say, associated to each other. But when we read any work of Nassim Ezekiel, we will find that there is a point of view which is established by the writer at the end of his work. There were many contemporary scholars of Ezekiel's who saw Indian English as a degraded version of English language. Now, this is a very serious thing. This is a very serious point which I wish to mention here, and which is why I had written. There are many contemporary scholars who think that the kind of English which the writers use into India, that is a degraded version of English language. But is it correct? Is it right? If we talk about the Nassim Ezekiel's poetry, can we say that Nassim Ezekiel's poetry is also reflecting that kind of degraded English language? Of course not. Well, Nassim Ezekiel was a person who deserves a little literary and academic recognition, and Sahitya Akademi was able to achieve that kind of understand that kind of depth, and thus he was awarded by Sahitya Akademi Award. So he deserved that literary and academic recognition, and he was able to get that academic recognition with the help of his works. Well, however, Ezekiel brought Indian English into the spotlight through very famous and entertaining poems. Now, if we talk about Nassim Ezekiel was a person who wrote, let's say, into various styles, who wrote many works. But it was very tough for me to, let's say, limit, to shortlist some works and to present in front of you, so that even if you read these works, you can understand the depth of the writing style of Nassim Ezekiel. The first one, which was very famous poem of Nassim Ezekiel, was Goodbye Party for Miss Pushpa T.S. Now, that title is very interesting. As soon as you read this title, you might think that so much simple English language, so much simple title, we read the title at once and we understood it. So, is there something different which writer or the poet has to say in this poem? Or is it something written in a very simple language, talking about a very simple theme, and we will read it and we will get bored? Well, we have to focus on this, we have to understand this only after reading this poem. And fortunately, it is compiled in our syllabus, and we are going to read it after understanding the poem Night of the Scorpion. Then there is another work of Nassim Ezekiel, that is Ganga, a very famous work. I suggest that you must read this work, Ganga, along with the next work, that is Soap. And one of the most widely read work of Nassim Ezekiel, that is Night of the Scorpion. Now, if you focus on these titles, Goodbye Party of Miss Pushpa T.S. or Ganga or Soap or Night of the Scorpion, you might find that these words, these titles, they are very common. We generally use them into our day-to-day life. So, how can title be framed of a poem or any literary work on the basis of these works? Because generally people think that in literature the titles are very complex. It is just like some kind of, let's say, some kind of unexplored incidents, chains of events which we are going to see into the work. But Nassim Ezekiel was the one who was able to achieve all these requirements with the help of his writings. Let us focus now on the poem Night of the Scorpion, as we have to begin the discussion on this poem. Getting a brief introduction of Nessim Ezekiel, now Night of the Scorpion is a free verse poem with 8 stanzas and a total of 47 lines. Now, this is something which is a basic introduction of Night of the Scorpion. There is a word which is coming in this line. It is free verse. Now, what is free verse? With no rhyme and no rhythm. So, can we consider it as a poem? Of course. The free verse, this kind of writing style became famous into the 20th century. Nessim Ezekiel adopted it and he was able to very well use it in his works, and especially into this poem Night of the Scorpion. Now, this poem not very long, it has only 8 stanzas and a total of 47 lines. So, you might question from yourself that can a message, can a brief message, can a life-changing message be conveyed into such a, let's say, small length? Only 47 lines? Are we able to learn anything with this poem? Of course. Even in 2 lines, a person can get a life-changing message, a life-changing experience. So, 47 lines were well utilized by Nessim Ezekiel into this poem. There is no set rhyme scheme and the meter is mixed. When we talk about the language, the way the poem is written, we will see that this poem has no set rhyme scheme. As I told you that it is written in free verse. And there is a mixing of meters into this poem. Meters, as all of you know, generally we talk about, let's say, in our day-to-day life, meter is something through which we analyze the length of something. In the same way, there is a term meter which is used into language as well, specifically into poetry. And there is a mixture of meters into this poem, Night of the Scorpion. The scorpion is seen by some as an evil force, bringer of pain and the hardship and even death. Now, when this word comes to your mind, scorpion, you might be threatened, you might be afraid, you might be, let's say, do not think about it again. And the image of a scorpion is very horrific into our mind. How the scorpion crawls, how the scorpion looks, how much dangerous the venom of a scorpion is. And Nessim Ezekiel has intentionally chosen the image of a scorpion to make us understand the seriousness of this, the incident, the event which is mentioned in this poem. The scorpion is seen by some of an evil force. Some people think in the Indian society that a scorpion is representing some kind of evil force. A scorpion is the bringer of pain. Suppose a scorpion bites you, then there is a kind of pain which you cannot tolerate. That is intolerable. And that represent a kind of evil force which enters into your body with the help of that venom. And then there is a lot of hardship which a person has to face if the scorpion bites that person. And even death may occur if the scorpion's venom is very dangerous. Let's say the scorpion's venom is too much tough for a human body. Note the use of the word diabolic, as a desperate creature stings the women and makes off out into the rain. Now, this point suggests that there is a word diabolic which is coming in the poem. Now, diabolic is a word that means something that is dangerous, something that is venomous, and it is well suited to the evil personality of scorpion. It is a desperate creature. We can consider this person, this creature, scorpion, as someone who is desperate, and the sting that stings the woman. That scorpion stings the woman. Who is that woman? The woman is the mother of the poet, the mother of the writer, and that makes off out into the rain. That scorpion bites the mother of the poet, and then scorpion vanishes into the rain. That can be again a very common incident which we had seen, which we might have seen in some village, in some remote area, in cities as well. But how can a poem be written on that incident? This was a very tough task which Nassim Ezekiel was able to achieve with the help of his writing this poem, Night of the Scorpion. Now, as happens after such kind of incident, when the scorpion bit the mother, the sting, the venom enters into the mother's body, there are peasants. Peasants means the people, the workers who live in the nearby places, the neighbors as well. They are seen as being superstitious and old-fashioned, even illiterate. We generally see it in the remote areas that the natives, the local people, they are considered as superstitious. They have their own beliefs. Although they might be orthodox for us, they might be traditional for us, but those ideas, those concepts, they are well real and suited to the life of these peasants and these people in the society. Now, those people, those peasants are considered as superstitious into their society. They are considered as old-fashioned. They are considered as illiterate. Now, all these images are associated with those peasants, with those villagers. And we have to understand, we have to judge the problems due to which, the circumstances due to which those people are considered as old-fashioned. They are illiterate. So, we have to understand that just because they are illiterate, they are old-fashioned, or they are superstitious, or there are any other reasons behind it. When we read the poem, we will try to understand all these things. They now having moved on in their thinking and culture. Now these people, they have their own thinking, they have their own culture, they move on their ideas, they move on their beliefs, and all those beliefs are the reality, the real world for them. They might be, let's say, very traditional for us, they might be very unbelievable for us, but that is the reality of their life, and we have to understand it after reading this poem. Then in the group of those peasants, there is a father, meanwhile is just the opposite of that sense. Father means the father of the poet, the father of the writer. He was the husband of the lady who was bitten by the scorpion. Now this person, father, is considered as just opposite of those common people. The imagery and symbolism, if you look at it after reading this poem, you will find that a very beautiful imagery of this father, a very beautiful portrait of this father is created by the poet into this poem, Night of the Scorpion. So he is portrayed as opposite to the other people, the other common peasants. He is considered as a rational, he is considered as a reductive type of person, different from them, and this person is also considered as unimpressed with the peasants and their acts. But as all of us know, that we cannot go against the society. Society, we have to behave according to the society in which we are living. So although this person, this father, there is no name given to this person, he is let's say he is announced as father only. So although he is a rational person, also he is a reductive type of person, but he was not able to believe, he was not able to impress by the activities which other peasants, which other people are performing around him, and thus he is considered as more rational as compared to the other writers, the other peasants. He resorts to using paraffins on the mother's stove, setting it alight. Now, you might find this kind of act as very dangerous. What is that act? The father put a pinch of paraffin on the mother's toe because a scorpion bit on the toe. So he put this paraffin, this is a kind of a powder. He put this powder on the mother's toe and then he sets a fire on it. Why? Because he thought that maybe with the fire, the venom which is inside the body of the mother, it will come out or it will burn. But he tried his best to perform this kind of act, but the mother was not relieved. Maybe this will never be suggested to you by any doctor, but he tried to do his best to calm, to console his wife. Even after performing all of these kind of acts, the mother twists in agony. Now, focus on the words which I use. The mother was twisting in pain. There was lot of agony, there was lot of pain. She was not able to tolerate it. And the bad thing is that she had to tolerate it for the entire night. How painful night was that? Every minute, every second, she was twisting and the venom was mixing in her body. But finally triumphs and does not succumb to the venom of the scorpion. So, fortunately, as happens, the poetry ended with a very positive note that the mother was able to tolerate that venom and she did not die. And ultimately, she triumphed on that venom and she was able to survive when the night was past. For all that time, she was unable to utter a word. Now, we saw in the entire poem that when the night was past, when the peasants were doing their best to console her, when the father was doing his best to console her, she was not able to speak, she was not able to utter a single word because she was twisting with pain. She was, let's say, moving with pain, but she was not able to utter a word. But then, when she calms down, when the venom disappears from her body, she was capable only of groans until the pain subsided and the relief she felt gave her the power to sum her experience up. Now, when the morning comes, this lady was capable only of groans. Before that, she was groaning. Groaning means there are various kind of painful voices coming out of her body until the pain subsided. But in the morning, just before the morning, the pain subsided. The pain was able to vanish from her body. The pain was able to mix. She was able to triumph from her willpower, that pain of venom which was mixed in her body. And when the relief comes to her, she felt gave her the power to sum her experience up. She was able to sum up her experience when she was able to get out of that pain. And the thing, this is very emotional, this line was very emotional. If you read the poem, maybe you also feel emotional, you may also cry. She uttered the statement saying that thank goodness it was her who took the sting and not her children. Now, just like the image of a mother, the mother is always concerned about her children. In the same way, this mother, although she is illiterate, although let's say she is not very matured, but even then she is concerned about her children. And the very first sentence she uttered is that had this scorpion bitten her children, she would have felt more pain than she felt in this night. So, mother is more concerned about the pain of her children rather than the pain of her own. such kind of, let's say, a divine message was given by the mother, a illiterate, let's say, rural lady, but even then she is considered as the goddess of modesty. We can consider her as the most loving mother into this world on the basis of this statement. So, that is all for today, and I hope that you are able to understand Nassim Ezekiel as one of the most established writers and most popular writers, and we were able to look at it with the help of the basic outcome of this poem, Night of the Scorpion. Thank you so much.